Thank you, Ann. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending. We have a nice, interesting subject today. Based on our attendance, a lot of you think so as well. We're going to talk about Skype for Business, previously called Link, in terms of some of the capabilities that you can enhance if you look at using our product along with Skype for Business. So if we kind of look at who we are, those of you that might not recognize our name, we're not the new kids on the block. We've been around since 1982. We've been focusing on call processing and messaging applications and unified communications applications more recently, and we've been doing it quite successfully for quite a long time. We have about 20 million users out there. We have a couple of locations here in the U.S., and we have a headquarters for our EMEA operations outside of London, and we basically are in this market in terms of as one of the major players, I feel comfortable saying, for unified communications, and particularly now in the Microsoft area. We're one of the few players that carries both a gold communications and messaging certifications, and we do this in conjunction with Microsoft because of some of the business that we're doing with that product line. If we look at kind of what we do, we build communications software, but we specialize that software a bit. There's only one application product we talk about, but depending on which pieces you buy and configure and use, it does definitely have slightly different focuses. We do things for individuals. Supporting communications for individuals is a big challenge these days with all the mobility pieces thrown in there. We do things for teams. Teams are kind of a new collaboration type grouping where we look at how people work when they work in groups today as opposed to the way they used to. And then, of course, at the overall enterprise or business level, we have solutions for some of those communications challenges as well. If we kind of look at how we kind of approach this, because we've been in the market a long time, we basically have a very solid product. Our product, I'm pretty comfortable saying, has the longest time on the market in this market space by many, many factors compared to the competition. We were lucky we started with an open platform in the very beginning, so we haven't had to sunset our product like most of our competitors have. So if you look at the very core essence of what we've done from the beginning, we have a voicemail automated attendant call processing system, and we're very good at using that to update enterprises who need to get rid of their legacy products. And one of the reasons we're so good is that we have all those legacy features because our product's been in the market for so long. And we're really kind of experts at extending the equipment life cycle, where we can offer all of the functionality we do regardless of the age or type of your PBX. So interoperability is a big piece of what we offer. We want to be able to go out and talk to anybody about our solutions without giving them the list of things they need to upgrade. But we're not unaware of what's going on. While we do spend some time in the legacy market, we are also fully capable of going into an enterprise that has moved forward or is looking at moving forward out into the cloud using IP, migrating to Skype for Business. That's another area that we have quite a bit of focus on. We'll talk about that area, obviously, in this webinar today. And then we're looking to the future as well. Things are changing all the time, and we have a number of solutions, and you can see some of these in our other webinars, that are very much first out in the market, focusing on the mobility side of it, on the speech interface side of it. All of that is part of what we do. We're lucky in that when we were founded, like I said, we started with an open platform. We were founded by people in the data industry, so they gave us a true three-tier architecture, which is not traditional what you find in telephony applications. So we have a core engine with application modules on the top and great interface modules on the bottom. We pretty much can connect to anything in the enterprise, regardless of the phone system type, regardless of the groupware type or the network architecture. And that gives us a chance to go in and basically solve problems for any of the customers we talk to. And we're a little unique in that we do this with one platform. This is the CXE platform. You literally can install our platform up to 120 ports and put every single feature we have on that one physical server. We don't have a separate speech server. We don't have a separate personal assistant server. We don't have a separate mobile server. This is all integrated software, which makes it very easy to deploy and very economical. But more importantly, it's easy to use. From a user's point of view, they don't end up with multiple interface applications that they have to learn for all the different types of features. So we put this stuff in, Users love it. We have great references, and that's probably the best thing you can say about a company that's providing solutions. New in the market for many of us is Skype for Business, or Link, or Office Communication Service if you started early enough. And this is a very interesting market. I mean, Microsoft got into the telephony side of the Link piece years ago when they started basically saying this can also be your phone system. And most people just watch that carefully for a while. I mean, Microsoft is kind of been known to dabble sometimes, but they're definitely not dabbling here. As we talk to customers, the majority of our enterprise customers are either discussing moving to Skype, have started moving to Skype, or at least acknowledge that it's something they have to watch, and moving forward, they can see where there's an interest there. So Microsoft has made itself a major player in the telephony market. As we talk to people, very few are really comfortable just yanking out their existing infrastructure and doing a one flash massive cutover to Skype. And there's a lot of reasons for that, not the least of which is, maintaining the legacy investment they have for as long as they can is generally considered a pretty good business practice. And then secondly, it's a major change. When you go from one phone system to another, traditionally, there's a little bit of difference in what the phones look like, etc. When you go to Skype, enterprise telephony, it's a major change. And there's great benefits to be had, but there's also some business disruption. So most of the people we talk about are doing this department at a time, a branch office at a time, kind of slowly, to make sure that it doesn't have a negative impact on their business. Where we come in this is we're a unique player in this market. If you want to deploy Skype for Business as your telephony infrastructure, then you get some sort of PSTN connection with SIP trunks or gateways, whatever pieces you would put in place. It's pretty wide open market in terms of how you would do that. Now your calls are coming in, and Skype is really operating, among other things, as your PBX. What's unique in this is the features in it are a little bit different than a traditional PBX features in terms of how it can integrate. So if you want to have a voice messaging system along with Skype, you have two choices in the market today. You have Exchange which is the Microsoft piece, which people use. A lot of people use that. Certainly that's an easy thing to deploy when you're deploying Skype. You will have Exchange. You can add the unified communications piece to that. That's one choice. The only other choice is the CXE platform. We're the only other platform currently capable of integrating with Skype and sitting behind Skype like we would sit behind any PBX and handling all the call processing, messaging, find me, follow me, IVR, etc. needs. We do all of that with every PBX, and really Skype is no different. So we will sit behind Skype, programmed as a trusted application. That's just a native kind of software enhancement you put into the Skype front-end servers. It'll now see our servers, and that means calls can come in from the outside and go straight, perhaps a DID or a DDI would ring to somebody's Skype client. That client would then forward, and it could forward to CXE straight into the user's mailbox. And that's one of the real unique differences. The client can forward anywhere, but in terms of an integrated forwarding to a personal mailbox, it can only go to Exchange or to us. That's one of the reasons Microsoft is involving us in this business. For those that don't want to use Exchange we're the only other choice. So that's a nice place to be in, with Microsoft pointing a lot of nice business towards us. Also, you can bring that call in straight through Skype and straight into CXE for a speech rec automated attendant and a full call processing solution. So any of you who are already familiar with our product, the big news is we hook to Skype, and the easy story to understand is we do it the exact same way with all the same types of features. Now, as I told you, a lot of the customers are sort of going to Skype a little bit at a time, and we offer a pretty strong advantage here. And the advantage is we go into an enterprise that has a disparate PBX environment. We can put a single system in that spans all of their locations, whatever types of phone systems they have, and now you don't carve out a technology island when you move one of your groups to Skype. It's all still part of the same system. And then later, as they move the other sites to Skype, it's just a matter of pressing a button in the subscriber's mailbox, and now they're attached to the other PBX or to Skype. So the centralization, the consolidation, and the slow rollout of Skype is something that we're extremely well architected to handle and actually make it quite a bit simpler than most of the other choices. Now, the reason most of these customers is talking to us today, the reasons there's a couple of them, but the two biggest ones have to do with message storage, and that's why this webinar is actually specializing in talking a little bit about voicemail. You know, we talk to people all the time that tell us voicemail is dead and dying, and doesn't really seem to be true from looking at our bottom line. But I understand that voice messaging is not as important as it used to be. In fact, it's not really a messaging system very much anymore. It's more of a call answering system. On the messaging side, very few people ever log into their voicemail to send someone else a message. You call someone, and then if they don't answer, it goes to voicemail. And one of the reasons I'm comfortable voicemail never goes away is because sometimes when people call you and you don't answer, they want to yell at you. They don't want to send you a text message. They want to tell you, call me right now. That personal component of voice communications really ensures that voice messaging never goes away. But we are very cognizant of the fact that what's much better than taking a good voice message is completing the call. So you can look at some of our other webinars about call completion and see the things we do. But today, when people are talking about Skype, the number one reason that Microsoft will bring us into a deal is compliance. And compliance is that issue about the need, and this varies depending on your industry, your company size, everything else, but there is a need in some cases to archive e-documents and make them available for discovery. That's a very vague statement when it comes to thinking about voicemail. I've yet to see any official statement that says voicemail has to be handled in a specific way. But it turns out a lot of customers do not want to put voicemails, either any of the ones in their organization or ones for specific business units, into Exchange. They just feel that puts them at risk. That opens them up to having to disclose more than they would have to if they don't put them in there. So the way this works from a Mitel opportunity is Mitel VAR goes in, they lay out the benefits of Link or Skype, which are considerable in terms of the way it integrates, and then somewhere down that process, you know, it becomes apparent that the messages have to be stored in Exchange, and some fairly large percentage of customers push back at that point and say, no, we aren't willing to do that. What are our other choices? And up until a year ago, there were no other choices. But now Microsoft will say, let us bring in a partner, and we have a different way we can do that there. And so that's what they do. They bring in one of our dealers, and basically we're able to say, you can store messages in Exchange if you'd like, or you can leave them on our server, not in Exchange, and that's on a user-by-user basis. So for the compliance issues, we're the way they overcome that objection. And there's a lot of business out there that's being channeled our way simply because customers do not want to store messages in Exchange. Now, this is something we've been aware of for years because we've had unified messaging applications out there for years that are capable of storing messages into Exchange. We do exactly what Exchange does, but we've known for years that there's a lot of customers that don't want that. The second piece, which is very similar, is confidentiality. In certain industries, there's concern that if you put a voice message that has information that would be considered confidential into email, that can easily get outside of the system. So if you think of healthcare, the HIPAA initiative basically says you must guard confidential patient information. So if you're a worker who gets voicemails from customers or voicemails about your customers that has patient information in them, you probably have a fairly strong aversion to storing those messages in Exchange. Once they're in Exchange, it's just too easy for those messages to get out somewhere. So from a HIPAA point of view, people will typically say, for this worker group, this set that handles that information, we are not willing to put those kind of messages in Exchange. And in that case, we come in, and for that group, we simply set them up to maintain their messages on the CXE server, and the rest of the users can go ahead and take advantage of storing their messages in Exchange. We basically can do both, so that solves the problem. Besides just HIPAA, there's a lot of other issues. There's FERPA, the same kind of thing for higher ed. There's legal departments of large enterprises. There's research departments in biotech companies. We've come across, I'm pretty sure hundreds by now, of customers who just don't want to put their voicemail into Exchange. So whether it's confidentiality or compliance, those customers that have issues, basically if they don't want to use Exchange for UM, we're the other alternative. And while Microsoft is not putting us up on their web page, and they're not really doing anything publicly to talk about us, they are turning business over to us at a pretty good rate, which we like. In that business, that doesn't impact link. You don't lose link functionality. Everything still works. And there's a lot of things that we do better than Exchange UM does that actually become advantages over using Exchange for UM. So in the messaging side for unified messaging, we've been doing unified messaging for over 20 years. We were the first person out there with it. I think we were out there about 2 years with it before anyone else came out. Didn't make us a lot of money back then. People didn't really understand what it was. It took a lot of vendors out there talking about UM to make it popular. But what we ended up with, because of that history, is the most flexible setup for unified messaging. So one of the ways we can do unified messaging mimics what Exchange UM does. Although I guess it's more accurate to say they mimic what we do, since we were doing it 15 years earlier than they were. But the concept is the same. The telephony element, in this case the CX server, records the message and then uses the various protocols for whatever the email server is. In this case, probably using Exchange Web Services. That message becomes an email message with a WAV file attachment and nice custom forms to make it easy for the user to play and all of that functionality. So that message is now accessible to them in the email client, and that's what a lot of people want. And that's called server-based unified messaging, since the two message types are integrated at a server level. But that's also the one that worries people. There's a lot of people that say, no, I cannot have my voice messages in my email system. What else you got? So there's a couple of other things we have. We can also do, whoops, that's a repeat slide, sorry there. We can also do client-based unified messaging, where you leave the messages on our store, and you simply program any IMAP email client to get to those messages. And for a long time, that was very popular. But it turns out, in that kind of architecture, you can still drag one of those voice messages from the inbox that shows voice messages to one of the folders on your Exchange system. You've effectively moved that message into Exchange, and a lot of people consider that that violates the idea of what you really want to do. So instead, what's popular is secure unified messaging. Secure unified messaging says we'll take the messages, we'll leave them on CX, but we'll still yet let the users get to them from a graphical user interface, and we'll provide that interface for free. So we have a user interface called Web Phone Manager that lets the users do lots of things, and one of the things of interest in this case is it will show them the messages on their system. They can play those messages over the phone, they can play those messages over their PC speakers, they can delete them, they can forward them to other system users, basically everything that they could do over the telephone interface, but what they can't do is get that message out of the system. There's no way with our client, you can't go file attachment save, you can't look for a hidden cache copy on the PC, because we're actually streaming those messages when we play them to the user. Very easy to deploy. Our web app installs on any of the customer's web servers. We support Apache, IIS, anything with basically with PHP. And since it's easy to deploy and it's very low touch and it's easy to use, this has become, when security is an issue, one of the most popular choices. That same client is very handy to have for a lot of other reasons. Lets the user set up their mailbox options, set up their Find Me, Follow Me, maintain their personal distribution lists. And one of the most popular features for help desks is it lets them reset their password if they've forgotten it. So Web Phone Manager solves a lot of those problems on the messaging side. We also have Simplified Unified Messaging, which says I can send a copy of messages. Not the original message, that stays on our system, but I can send a copy out to any email address. This is very popular when you bring contractors on board where you're not actually going to put them on your email system. But in the terms of link, this, if you're worried about confidentiality and compliance, this would probably not be something you would use. But what you can do is set this up to send the email message without the message attachment. So now what I get in my email is a message saying, you have a new voicemail, and I can include in the template the number, and if I'm looking at that on my mobile device, I hit that number and it calls in and I get it over the phone, or the Web Phone Manager address. So when I click that link, it takes me to Web Phone Manager, and I can get the message from there. So Simplified Unified Messaging is a great tool for people that want to use secure, but also want to know when they get those new messages. If you look at as we look at replacing Exchange as part of a link opportunity, and this is true for any PBX, but as a part of the link opportunity, there's a lot of things that we offer that make that transition easier and overcome some of the shortcomings that some customers perceive in the Exchange for piece. One of the things is our mobile user interface, our speech interface, our AVST Total Office Manager package, which gives you a very powerful speech interface for users. Now, Exchange has a speech interface, but to be fair, it's only 2 or 3 years old, so it's not very well developed. Ours has been around for about 15 years, and it is extremely powerful. And that's one of the things that makes the transition a little bit easier. I think it's important for people to be able to move from their old system to their new system with the minimum of business disruption. And trust me, when they move from a traditional PBX to Link, there will be a lot of challenges based on that alone. Let's not make their messaging and call processing engine one of those challenges as well. Another piece, if you're moving from a legacy system and going to Link, if you go to Exchange they have their own telephone interface. It doesn't really seem like any of the rest, and that's a big disruption. So what we do is we offer the telephone user interface emulations. So we have a software package we enable that can make any user's interface act just like an ARIA, Serenade, Centigram, any of these listed here. Very, very accurate, most accurate in the market, top to bottom, addressing messages, everything. So that's a key piece as you're looking at transitioning and understanding how much impact is this going to have when we move over, and I can minimize some of that impact by using the alternate telephone user interfaces. There's also a whole raft of other features that we do that go beyond what Link offers with Exchange and we have other webinars you can see on the schedule about those, call processing, automated attendant, IVR, all sorts of things that will make that Link transition much less painful and much more productive in terms of delivering very productive employees very quickly. And now we're ready for some questions.
Okay, thanks, Neil. A couple of things. If you have minimized the question box, you can find it with the orange arrow in the upper right corner if you're looking to submit a question. We do have a couple in the queue here. And just a reminder, if you missed the first few seconds of the webinar, we do have the slides posted in the handouts area. You can download them there, and I will also send those out via email later today, as well as a recording of the webinar once it's available online. So Neil, first question. Did you say you can enable different message store methods by user?
Yes, either by user or class of service, because typically these deals we're talking about have thousands of users. But yes, it's possible. When you go into a subscriber mailbox, there's a couple of radio buttons that basically say, well, what do you want to do with your messages? You want just telephone access, traditional voicemail? You want to put them into the email server, traditional unified messaging? You want to leave them on the server and let the customer get to them with our web client or our mobile client? Those are individual choices. What we usually do is we have customers set up in kind of in classes of service. It just makes it easier for the administrator.
Okay, great, thanks. Next, there's actually a couple of questions regarding whether or not we light the message waiting indicator.
Except for Link, yes, we do. There's actually two pieces of functionality that right now are blocked from us from Microsoft. And this is kind of interesting because when we sat down and went over our functionality with the Link group, they said, well, why don't you do these two things? And we said, because your Exchange group has locked those down in such a way developers don't have access to them. And they said, oh, no problem. We will get them to open them up for you. And that was 18 months ago, and they still haven't opened them up. So today, we cannot light a message waiting indicator on either a Link client or if you have one of the special Link phones. And the second piece is if you have the Link client and you have Exchange for you see your voice messages in a little visual voicemail that's part of Link. You won't get that with us either. But we do, as I said, have our own visual voicemail client with Web Phone Manager.
Okay, next question. Are there notable integration differences between Link and Skype for Business?
It's kind of interesting. When they went from Link to Skype for Business, there are great differences in the user client. There are almost no differences on the server. So other than some maintenance issues and diagnostics issues, there really was no difference between the last version of Link and the first version of Skype. So at this point, there's really no difference from us at all in how we function with that.
Okay, next question. Will this work with Office 365 Skype for Business once they have enterprise voice available?
We hope so. This is another discussion we've had with Microsoft. Today, as most people know, if you get Office 365 Link, they will not allow you to have enterprise telephony, and that's a major thing for them to support. That involves bringing in telephony resources of some type from the enterprise into the hosting center. So they're working on that. They have told us they intend to support that in Skype. They haven't promised us a particular software version yet, and they have said it is their intention to support third-party products such as ours doing that as well, but we don't have anything in writing, so it's still a little bit up in the air.
Okay. There's a question about how we license the product. I'm not sure how much detail you want to go into.
Sure. Well, it's actually not too complicated. We're a little different than most of our competition. We don't license it by mailbox, so you can have as many mailboxes as you want. We do license ports. So the number of active voice connections from the outside world into our server is kind of the main license. So you can buy 4 channels, 8 channels, 96 channels that way. Then there are a few application licenses on top of that. There's a license that's required if you want to store messages in Exchange or get them from your email client, but is not required if you're going to use the Web Phone Manager version. So that kind of, you have to look at how you're going to deploy it to figure that piece out. And then our personal assistant is an individual user license, which gives you the mobile client, the ability to route calls based on the Exchange calendar and link status, the ability for us to know if a user is in a particular location so we know what device to send calls to. Those are individual licenses. And then there's a few application licenses on top of that.
Okay, another question, and this one you may have covered it when you got to the simplified slide, but I'm not. You may want to maybe clarification. So can you have the voicemail message display in the Exchange inbox and retrieve them in the CX server rather than using Web Phone Manager?
Well, so we can put an email message into Exchange that has a link that is either the telephone number for you to call in with or our Web Phone Manager link. There's really no way for us to build anything, or at least we haven't built anything, that lets you actually from the email client play it directly from within the email client.
Okay. Another question, do you support OVA Outlook voice access for dial-in from phones to check voicemail, email, etc.?
So if you're using our product instead of Exchange you won't be using Outlook voice access. You'll be using our interface. And yes, when you call in with our interface, it gives you everything OVA does plus a lot more. So I can call in. In fact, it's pretty typical for me to climb in my car in the morning, head to work, and hit the Bluetooth button, and the system comes back and says, "Hello, Neil Butler, what would you like to do?" And I say, "Get my calendar appointments for today," and it reads me my appointment. I say, "Get new email," and it reads me my email. All that functionality is available in our interface, and that's what you'd use in place of OVA.
Okay. Do we support shared or group voicemail? And with group voicemail, can each user have their own password, or do those need to be shared?
So we have to have probably part of that discussion offline, because group voicemail means different things. So let me tell you what's in the core product. The core product will allow us to have one extension supporting many mailboxes. So think of a nurse's desk on the 6th floor. When it rings, there's different nurses and different shifts who might be there. So if that call doesn't get answered, it goes to our system, which on the fly builds a greetings that says to leave a voice message for Nurse John, press 1. For Nurse Betty, press 2. So that's a standard feature. If any of those mailboxes have a new message, the message waiting light on that extension goes on, and when somebody looks down and picks it up and calls in, it says there are new messages for Nurse John, and then only that user has to log in to get them. So that's many mailboxes, one line. We also support many lines associated with one mailbox, which is I might have 3 office buildings in Chicago, and I have an office in each one. Each one's a different telephone system. We put a single system in that supports all of them, and any of those phones ring and go to voicemail, all those messages come into my mailbox. And I light the lights, with the exception of Skype, on all of those phones if I have a new message. So those are the 2 standard pieces. Now, the other group mailbox functionality, sometimes we have to put some custom software into play to do that. And people want different things from group mailboxes. We do things like have a mailbox that will come in that will send out copies of the message to multiple users, and they'll have their own copy and then get in and delete them. But if they actually want a mailbox where any user can log into it and delete the message and it's gone for every user, we have to build that with our custom software tool. So there'd be an additional charge for that.
Okay, another question. Do we support multi-tenant environments such as hosted offering for multiple clients?
Depends on who you talk to in our facility. We are not designed to do that. There are things we've done to make that work, and we have dealers and companies who have done that. But there are a few things that we do not partition. So let's start with what we do partition. I can set up any lines to go to special menus that belong to that one company. I can put all those users in that one company in so they function in the same way and they use the same resources. I can have a speech or a DTMF front-end directory that if company 1 calls in and it hits company 1's menu and they say John Smith or they dial John Smith's name, it will only search their directory to go in. I can create distribution lists that are only accessible within those user groups. A couple of things I can't do. If I'm a user and I log into my mailbox and I want to send somebody a message and I want to use a directory because they don't know their mailbox number, that will not be tenanted. That will look at everybody on the system. And sometimes that's enough to close it down right there. And then the other piece is an administrator can see everybody. There's no way of saying, just show me this set of companies. Now, we can set up administrators with different levels of capability in terms of what they can do, but we can't partition them. So I would not say we're the ideal system for a hosted tenant services kind of environment.
Okay, thanks, Neil. So another question about integrating. So how do the steps to integrate Skype for Business with CXE differ compared with the steps for integrating with Exchange UM?
So those are actually two things that are going on. On the integration to Exchange UM, we're going to use Exchange Web Services, and we're going to be either reading email messages and possibly putting messages in Exchange, reading the calendar, reading those various pieces. That's one integration link that we build. And we go into our system and we just use some credentials from the Exchange server and build that. The telephony integration, which is into Skype, is more like a SIP integration that we build into a traditional PBX. We go and build that trusted application. The Skype administrator builds the trusted application pool, and that's how that gets tied together. So one is a live voice connection, and the other is a store and forward email type connection. And then we have a third connection, which is we do connect to Link using their managed API to read status. So we're one of the few systems where you can say, if a call comes in for me and my Link status or Skype status says, I'm busy, I'm away, whatever status you've set, then don't send me a call. Or it says, I'm in the building, but I haven't touched my computer in 20 minutes, then play a different greeting that say you're in the building, but you're not at your phone, and then go ahead and try and ring my Skype client anyway. So there are a couple of different levels of connectivity back into the Microsoft backend.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Well, it looks like that wraps up the questions, unless, as I was scrolling, I missed any. We do route all the questions internally for follow-up to make sure that we answered them appropriately, so many of you may hear from someone here just to check in and make sure we answered. And in addition, you can always submit your questions to us at any time to our general email, which is info@avst.com. And certainly we welcome any questions or feedback that you might submit there, and we will get those routed to Neil or someone else who can answer. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. We'll look forward to getting the recording from us as well as future webinar invites, and I'll go ahead and also let Neil close us up with some parting words.
I'd just like to thank everybody for taking the time. We do these for you so you can get this information and have it available to you. If you need it to be more in-depth, less in-depth, quicker, more frequent, the feedback you would give us at info@avst.com is definitely something we value, and we designed this entire program based on that. So thank you for coming.
All right. Thanks, everyone, again, and have a great day.
To learn more about AVST, please visit www.avst.com.